Good afternoon. I am Kenny James, acting principal of the Grenada Boys Secondary School. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's activity. The GBSS right now is 140 years, 17 hours and 45 minutes old. Yesterday, the 2nd of February, we celebrated GBSS Day, as we call it, the birthday of our institution. We went to church. We got the blessings from God. And from church, we had brunch. So we sat around the table to have some sweet fellowship and swallowship. This morning, the student body convened at the Great Hall, where we are presently, the auditorium, for that extensive assembly. It lasted the entire morning. It was awesome. Many of you may have viewed it or will view it live or later. That's up to you. It's the advantage of having the technology. The theme for our celebration, 140 years, honoring the past, embracing the present, inspiring the future. And this evening, we want to indeed honor the past. The GBSS undoubtedly is a school with a rich history. We want to delve into some of that history this evening. And joining us to share with us is an expert panel, a lady who has dedicated her life to education, but I would say she is caught between two lovers, the GBSS and the Anglican High School, because before becoming principal of the Anglican High School, Mrs. Glenda Mason-Francis was a teacher here at the Grenada Boys Secondary School of French. And I'm sure she would tell you more about that and her experiences at the GBSS. And as I always say to the high school girls, she never left us. She is always here with us. Joining her is a gentleman who is honored to be one of our stalwarts in Grenada in the area of art. As a matter of fact, presently, we have many of his pieces on display in the auditorium. So it's not too late for you to join us in the live audience and to have a view of the artwork and the wonderful pieces. Mr. Gordon de la Motte is not only one of Grenada's most outstanding artists, and if you're old enough, you'll know about Moped. And if you know about Moped, you'll also know the other name that would be called along with him is Mr. de la Motte, as having done excellent work in Grenada. There are others, but these are just some household names. He has done work in Grenada, in England. He's a writer, and he too has done a lot. But for us this evening, one of the things we want to focus on is the fact that he was part of that group that made the transition from Melville Street to the barracks at Tantine in the 1940s. And so he's going to delve into that. To facilitate and taxi us through this evening's proceeding is the best host we could have found for something like this. Why? He is a GBSS boy. In some respects, a linguist. His flamboyance and language sometimes, is out of this world. Excellent cricket commentator. For us, apart from being a 1982 graduate of the GBSS, Pastor Stevenson Worm wrote a history of the Grenada Boys Secondary School. And in short order, the revised edition will come out, spanning the period 1885 to 2024. So even as a principal who have spent my first year as principal of the GBSS, I'm captured in the book. So look forward to purchasing your revised copy of the history of the GBSS. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to hand us over to our host for the evening, Pastor Stevenson Worm, and our panel. Let's put our hands together for them.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Headmaster Kenny James, and good evening to everyone. Wherever you're listening, whatever part of the globe you are, we welcome you to this very, very important event here. And as was intimated a little early on, we've got two noble individuals who would, of course, help us through our journey looking at the history of the Grenada Boys Secondary School, of course, which dates back to 1885. And for those of you who may not be aware of it, we are not the oldest institution, educational institution here in Grenada, but St. Joseph Convent in St. George's. 10 years earlier, of course, 1875. But of course, our attention will be on the Grenada Boys Secondary School. And it'll be hard for us to cover the entire history, of course, dating way back to 1885. So we would look at that transition period where, of course, GBSS had moved from Church Street onto Melville Street. So we're going to look at that transition and thereafter. Now, it was, in fact, in 1911, the school opened its doors at Melville Street, September 11, 1911, and the principal then was a gentleman called He-Dog Jones. And the school remained at Melville Street for the next 35 years. And then, of course, we had the transition to the present site where the school now resides, this hill here at Tantine. So let's delve into that transition period. And let me just quickly ask Mr. De La Motte, your years at GBSS, could you tell us exactly what year you started at Melville Street? I know that you moved from Melville Street to here at Tantine, but tell us when you started.
Yes, so 1945 to 1950. Yeah.
Okay, so just when you were, 1945.
The war was still going on, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the war ended in the middle of 1945, and we moved in here in January 1946.
Yes.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the premises at Melville Street. What was it like? What was
the premises at Melville Street, as you know, the building which is along the road is still there. The ground floor we had as our assembly hall. The classrooms were above it. And on the building next door, there were classrooms and offices. There was a school gymnasium there. And then there was an open courtyard where it's still used as an open courtyard there.
And what took place on that open courtyard?
The cadet corps went there, and we sometimes had cricket practice and parades. Any real large function, we assembled there, and what important visitor or so will come and speak to us there. I wasn't there for long, and at the time, we had a headmaster from America called Dr. Rankin.
Wilfred Rankin.
Rankin, who only stayed 1 year. And then we, in January 1946, we moved up here because, of course, one of the things I find a lot of people do not seem to recognize enough is how much the wars, the World Wars I and II, affected people in Grenada. Because what was here was an army camp. And what we had were wooden barracks along here. And our classrooms, when we moved in 1946, were simply partitions put up to divide the barracks into compartments so that you could have a form in one and another form in the next. So you often had 3 or 4 forms in one barrack. We were not the only people to move up here. The girls' high school actually moved up as well. They had the N barracks here, and the high school mistress used to be on the side there. And we had the toilets were at the back.
Okay.
And there was a fence put up between the girls' shed and the toilet. And we used to jokingly say it was to protect us from the girls. Right?
Okay. But let's just go back a bit, though. You talk about the Cadet Corps, of course, which was established in GBSS back in 1916. Did the Cadet Corps participate in national events? What sort of things did they do?
Yeah, because you see, here was the army. And of course, that wasn't the end of it, because when the trouble came with Derry and you had Sky Red and all that sort of thing, we had a column of Welsh Fusiliers who came and were residents. So we had to make room for them because there used to be what was the army commissary there, and behind that was the cookhouse. And you had a storeroom for ammunition as well there. And when the Fusiliers came, we had to give up some of our stuff. And of course, we learned a thing or two about the British working class. Until then, we thought, well, British working class were respectable people. But then we were shocked by the kind of language that some of the soldiers used to come out. Mm-hmm. So much so that it became a habit. If one of our friends said something a bit crude, we would all shoot Fusiliers. We were surprised that their behavior was so loose and careless, especially the liberal use of the F word in every context. Yeah?
Okay.
And we had that. So that's the way we were here. Of course, we were still part of the British Empire, and we had to walk from here to the Market Square twice between Easter holidays and 24th May to know our place in the Market Square for the Empire Day celebrations. And on the Empire celebrations, we lined up in our respective places in the Market Square, and the British governor came and gave his address from the king. In those days, it was still the king. The queen has not come in yet. So he used to deliver his Majesty's address. And that was the way our school operated our first few years here. The playing field down there was still very rough because this top had been made flat by cutting away a mound and dumping the rubble down there, so that where it's now the playing field, the netball court and the playing field was actually water just before that. And there was still water along from the curve of the hill here to the corner of by the roundabout. That was where the sea came in. So we still had the spout over here. And we used to have boats coming in there. And we used to go swimming in the spout. Well, not during school hours, of course, but on weekends. But so that's the way it was very different.
Okay. You talked about...
What else was there? I can't think more at the moment.
You talked about Wilfred Rankin. Could you tell us a little bit about him? What sort of person was he?
Who?
Wilfred Rankin.
Oh, Dr. Rankin. Oh, he was very American and very... He was very keen on traditional education. He was keen on having Latin spoken.
Okay.
We had to have... our Latin was very strong. And he was progressive in his own way. But looking back, I feel sometimes he was ahead of us.
Okay.
Yeah? And we needed to catch up with him. But there were people who did very well under his schooling.
And,
Yeah.
and you were also under Raul Jordan, weren't you?
Yeah.
Raul Jordan?
Jordan,
Yes.
Jordan came after. Mr. Archer acted in between.
That's correct.
Yeah, there were two archers, the Bear Archer and the other archer. There were two archers. And of course, the only Grenadian teachers we had at the time was Mr. Maguire, Mr. Batiste, and Mr. Martineau as regulars. And we had a few teachers who taught, like Mr. L.A. Lagunard, the Governor General's father. He taught us for a while here. And Lennox Phillips taught at GBSS for a while. And a gentleman called Mr. Sembernard, I don't remember where he came from. But most of our teachers then came from Barbados. Some came from Trinidad. And some came from Guyana. One or two came from Guyana.
Yes.
Yeah.
Former President Desmond Hoyt also was a teacher here. Desmond Hoyt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So we got all that.
Okay, could you tell us a little bit about the uniform?
Yeah.
What did the uniform look like back then?
The uniform was much the same as it is more or less now. It hasn't changed much. We had to have a dark blazer, though.
Yes?
We had to have a dark blazer on, and we had gray trousers, same school tie, and white shirt. Yeah.
Were the guys in short pants or long trousers?
Yeah, mostly in short. I think from about the fourth form up, some of the people did wear long trousers. Mm-hmm. But lower down, up to Form 3, we were more or less in short pants. Yeah.
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 What was it like
Yeah.
initiating a new student coming into GBSS in your time? Was there any sort of initiation at all?
Oh, it was. The old boys used to line up, and as you walked through, they gave you a rap as you went along. You were lucky if your head weren't blistered by the time you got to the end of the
Was it
course.
just a gentle tap, or was it a real
It
tough
should be a gentle tap, but some people don't know what gentle means. And so it was. So, but after a while, they stopped it.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because-
Is it that these young folk
but I
come
don't
in-
think it ever took place up here. It took place in Melville Street.
Did the parents resist that
I think
at
in
all?
Melville Street, it was often because you had to come through a gate and a passageway.
Oh, okay.
Whereas here you had open grounds, And of course, here you had a circular grass pitch which we are not allowed to walk on. And you had a little tuck shop over there as well. So that's the way it was.
Okay. Mrs. Mason, of course, he's been here. By the way, for listeners and audience,
one more
Mr.
thing.
Lamont, he is 91, so we just want to let you know that.
One more thing.
Yes.
There was a hostel then.
Yes.
There was a boys' hostel where, of course, there weren't transport, and that wasn't what it was. So people from Sauters and Grenville and Victoria often boarded at the school hostel.
Where was that located at the
Which
time?
was placed round the back here, mostly. Right. So you had the boys' hostel. People like Sir Paul Schoon and so on were at the hostel on the Fridays. Yeah, Dr. Friday, and that. So some of those people from Sauters and Victoria.
Okay.
But I don't know when it stopped. But of course, I worked for a while after leaving school, and I went to England in 1958. So I don't know what changes took place after that.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mrs. Mason-Francis, tell us, you came here in 1964, and one of the early females here, our first female teacher was Rosetta Smith in 1918, I think it was. What was it like being one of the early female staffers here? What was your experience like?
I wonder if I could go back a little
It's okay, that's all right, and then
Yes.
you can take up from my
and take
question.
you
Yes,
up to when I came up here.
yes.
Because I would like to say I was involved in sports here from since I was a little girl. could say perhaps around the early 1950s. And I was about 10 years old. At that time, my mother, Mrs. Daphne Giddens Mason, became a member of a group of ladies who were called Friends of the GBSS. And they would have been replaced by what is now the PTA. No women were involved, and these people volunteered, so that whenever there were activities and things where you had to have tea and refreshments, these ladies were in charge of that. And when my brother began school there as a student, and he was put in Hughes' house, which is green, then that became the family house, Hughes. Also, I would like to go back a little again to the time when you had the Windward Island sports. And that was between Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Dominica. And again, people had to house the athletes from different islands. And our home became a place where we would have students from these other islands staying. When I joined the staff of the GBSS in 1964, I happened to be the only female teacher, and I became one of the mistresses of Hughes House. I was in charge of badminton and the other sporting activities. And Hughes House became a house and a force to be reckoned with. In 1965, when the secondary school intercall games was initiated, again, well, being a woman, and woman in those days, you had to do certain things. I was the secretary of the association. And today, perhaps I could be one of the few teaching members who is still around. I still have notes and programs from the early days of intercall and changes that were made through the years. I have followed the development of sports in secondary schools throughout the years with great enthusiasm. Of course, when I became the principal of the Anglican High School in 1984, my ambition was to make the AHS one of the greatest schools in the area of athletics and netball. Of course, we had our brothers across the hill who gave us their full support. GBSS and high school, you can't break off that friendship that exists. Well, we had to build on the foundations that were laid before and set out to have these two schools, the leaders of the intercall games. It so happened, some years later on, the pen relays, where the Anglican High School was forward enough to say they'd taken part in that. And they won. Now let's talk, I'd like again to talk a little about netball and interest in netball. There's so much history, a lot of things people don't know about. When you talk about netball, now it's a big something. But in the early days, in the 1950s, netball tournaments used to take place in the botanical gardens, right at the top there. That is where it was near to the band house. And then we started now what was called Grenada, that is a national netball competition taking place between Grenada, Dominica, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent, Trinidad as well. Our Grenadian team excelled. And some people might remember names like, you might remember the name like Rovers, with Dorothea Sylvester and Pearl Menz and Joyce Blash and these people. The seniors who laid the foundation for netball in Grenada nowadays, you don't really hear or you don't know about these people.
Yeah, well, they obviously made the mark in netball, but
Yes.
we wouldn't divert too much, there, if we can just zero in
Yes.
on GBSS, because while you're on that, GBSS did have a netball team at one point, and a lot of people might not be aware of that. In fact, there was a time when GBSS had a male netball team, and they did play against female. But GBSS in the 70s did have a female netball team and participated in the intersecondary netball school competition. So some of the players from the other schools that came to the sixth form, they became part of the netball team. Am I right?
Yeah, he played 40s. Men used to play.
That's correct, yes. Men played against the ladies in the 40s. GBSS actually had a male team that participated and performed pretty well too. Yeah, there was a team that came from St. Lucia back in 48, I think it was, and GBSS played against them, male team, and won.
Yeah.
So that might be surprising information to people, but there existed a male netball team at the Grenada Boys Secondary School.
Yes. I mean, talking sport, I suppose there's somebody we ought to mention. You have him on the notice board there. The Gittins brothers were very good athletes in the 1940s. George was very bright, and he was in line for an island scholarship, but he had an accident on a bicycle and lost his faculties.
Yes, I heard about that.
But the younger brother, William, was one of those cases where time does not allow you to function in some ways. Because William, we talk about Karani, but William was probably the best all-round athlete we ever had in Grenada. He had the Commonwealth high jump record, the local long jump record. He was the best 400-meter runner, the best man over 110 hurdles. He played football, he played cricket, and if you didn't want to get hurt, you didn't put on gloves with him and go into the ring.
Yes.
He was not a one performance person. He was an all-rounder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we will talk a little bit more about sport, but Mrs. Mason, Francis, I would like to just go back then. I mean, with your entering into the school, lone female teacher, so to speak, it must have been a pretty challenging experience for you. And you were obviously much younger.
Oh, yes.
Then you had guys who were probably 18, 19. I'm sure they would have looked at you in a...
Well, if I tell you about, my early days at the Grenada Boys Secondary School. Yes, when I started teaching here, the only female teacher on a staff of how many men? And in the office, all we had was a bursar, and then we had 2 secretaries. And when I am leaving the staff room, down there, to come up, everybody running to help me with my books and so on. And in those days, remember, our Form 6 students were in their 18s, 19s, and some of them 20s. So young men.
Yes.
And on my way, I will be hearing the sip, 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 sip.
Oh, they were hissing at you, weren't they?
And I'm looking right, neither right nor left. Nobody knows who they're talking to. Only.
Did you see that as rather disrespectful on the part of these 19-year-olds and 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds?
No, well, to me, they were all children's school boys and treated as such. I had no intention of, and I put them in their place on many occasions, letting them know who is the teacher and who is the student. So that is what it was like in those days. And then I remember, too, the rules we had in the school about our students and partaking in public functions and like alcohol and that sort of thing. It was a no-no. On one occasion, carnival time, there was a dance at Richmond Hill Club, Sunday night dance.
That was the Lions Den?
No, not Lions,
then.
the Richmond Hill Club.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they had a dance up there. They had a tennis court in front.
I got you.
For the dance. So a few of us, members of staff, were up there at the dance. And where we were standing, we could see people coming in. And lo and behold, some of our sixth formers and our prefects, they were coming in. Of course, when they saw us, because where we were standing, they were able to see, you could see they almost jumped. But they couldn't do anything. They came straight up to where we were. One of the male teachers, "Gentlemen, what are you all doing here?" And they replied, "So we were passing and we heard the music, so we came to see what was happening." The reply, "Well, you came to see what was happening, so now you have seen what's happening, you may leave." And all they had to do was turn around and leave. One of them was smoking. Well, again, smoking. He almost burned his hand trying to hide the cigarette. The next day, they were reported, and they were suspended. And of course, some of the parents came to ask Mr. Matisse, please, could you? And no. The rules of the school. And I remember on one occasion, when I had to tell Mr. Matisse, because that parent was a good friend of the school and all of that. I said, "Sir, if any of these boys were to return to school and they are allowed to come back in, then you will have my resignation in." And that was the end of that.
Okay. And who were those female teachers that followed you? Thereafter, I think we had Jean Thompson and others that came around.
Yeah, well, Jean Thompson, you had the two Masons, Maria, and you had Louise, Conrad's wife. And then you had quite a few, Jackie Kreft and different people came in, after that. Mrs. Liz Henry Greenwich.
Right.
And so on. Well, now, I suppose you have lots of female members of staff.
Okay. Now, I'm going to put this question to both of you because I know that corporal punishment had been around in GBSS for quite a long time. Mr. Delamotte, tell us a little bit about corporal punishment. What was used? Was there a strap, a leather strap? Was it a whip?
Oh, they
caning.
You had the cane, yeah.
What was the cane in your time?
Oh, it was literally one of those thin bamboo things, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
it was bamboo,
yeah,
like in your time?
Bamboo type thing, yeah. Yes, it was. Yeah.
Who chose the cane? Who got the cane? The headmaster himself?
The headmaster gave you. Yes, you stood up and he gave you on your bottom. Yes.
But what I remember in those days, I think, between Wesley and Griffith, our janitors, they were the ones who used to go and look for it. Get whatever they chose as it and bring it into the headmaster.
So hold on. Mr. Wesley, he was asked to go get the cane. What did he bring back, Mrs. Mason-Francis?
What he brought it back?
What did he bring back?
In those days, about not the bamboo, there was a special, I can't remember the name of the...
I hope it wasn't the flambeau, was it? No?
No.
Okay.
No. It was a special tree, some sort of thing that they used, a limb or a twig. Very narrow and so on, but very effective. And that is what was used.
But I must say that, caning took place within the context where there was a lot of violence against children by some teachers, really. You know, J.W. Fletcher used to have a length of strap, you know, which he used to call the Conqueror. And he would come in the morning and put it into a basin of water and oil it.
Yeah.
You know, and there was an extreme case where another teacher who followed him was known to be very, very keen on administering punishment to people. And it came to that a woman went to the school to complain about the way he punished, he had beaten her son, and he actually beat the woman.
It really did?
Yeah, it happened here in Grenada, yeah.
Okay. But were you caned at all at GBSS?
Yeah, yes, I got 6 of the best
Are you
ones.
serious?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about that, Mr. Dolomar?
That was trying to get away from the practice for the Empire Day Parade.
Who caught you?
And with some others, I got caught. Yeah.
So which of the headmaster administered the caning at that time?
Mr. Jordan.
Mr. Jordan.
It was under Mr. Jordan I got that. Yeah.
How did it feel?
Oh, not very nice, I must say. But there's a bit of me getting caned, which I wonder if I should say, because one of the people who got caned was a thin boy. We used to call him Goofy, because his legs, his feet and hands seemed bigger than his body because he was very thin. And after we all got the caning and we were going down, he was the only one crying. And someone said, well, what's happened, Goofy? What happened? And apparently, because he was thin, the cane went round his body and hit him on his testicles.
Oh.
So that must have been very, very painful.
Oh. Must have been.
Yes,
Okay, tell us, what other forms of discipline were there at the school in those early years?
Oh, you had detention, and you had the minor offense book that you, if you got 2 minor offenses in a week, then you got a caning. Right. And in fact, Mr. Maguire was very fond of using the minor offense book, so much so it was called Mr. Maguire's own book, the MOB.
Interesting. Mrs. Mason, did you ever cane any of the boys?
Me?
Yes.
No.
Oh, you never did?
Oh, no.
It was administered mainly, of course, by the headmaster.
That was the job of the headmaster.
Yes.
I would never have dared to attempt to. No. Caning was just the headmaster's job.
But I must say, I mustn't sort of malign Mr. Maguire, because, you know, he was friendly with my family as well. And my mother despaired about my performance at school at one stage, largely because there were problems within the family. And she said to ask Mr. Maguire what she thought about me. And Mr. Maguire gave her the classic statement. He said, the boy's not stupid, he just hasn't found his way yet. Yeah.
But what was the level of discipline like in the school back then?
Yeah.
I mean, for you to get caned, I would suspect that you had to do something rather atrocious, rather naughty to be caned.
Yeah, but it wasn't used, at GBSS, it wasn't used liberally. No, it was infrequent. You had to go over the top a bit to get caning, really. You know?
Okay. Mrs. Mason-Francis, did we have experiences when boys refused to take the administration of cane, so to speak, and brought their parents back home? We had those situations?
Well, there were situations, though they were rare. If a student refused to be caned, again, it's the principal doing the caning, the principal was the only one. Then he was sent home with a letter to his parents and asked to remain at home for a certain time, and when he's coming back, the parents have to accompany him. So then the headmaster will speak to them, and he had to take his cane to be allowed to come back. However long it was, he was out But to come back and be part of the school, the punishment he should have got then, he had to get it.
Oh,
So this is what happened.
tell us, Mr. De La Motte, early back then, back in the 40s, what were some of the subjects taught back then?
Oh, pretty much what we have. We had history. Our history we used to start in the Form 1, 1066 to 1485, 1485 to some other date, and another one till 1914. We used to have different dates in history. It was, of course, largely British history about British battles, heroes, kings, and queens. You know, not much about the Caribbean.
Okay.
Certainly not about Africa. Yeah, and that sort of thing. So, and on geography, we used to do Europe and Asia, and then we had Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and somewhere else again. We used to do them in different sections. Yeah. Yes.
But initially, when you came, Mrs. Francis,
we also had Latin and French.
Right.
And later, we had Spanish as well.
You started off, Mrs. Mason-Francis, as a history teacher, am I right?
Yes.
Yes, and
then,
oh.
okay, when I came, and we had West Indian history, British history, European history, the three of them.
And you were expected to teach all those?
Pardon?
You were expected to teach
Well, I
all
did
those?
West Indian history.
Just West Indian history?
Yes. And again, the important thing was showing the connection between the British, the European, and the West Indian history.
And then you just went full-bloodedly into French.
Well, no,
What happened?
I did Latin and French as well.
Oh, you did
Both
Latin?
and French. Those were the subjects I did at UWI,
Okay.
at the University of London at the time.
What was your experience like teaching both subjects?
Nothing, I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them, I love them, and it's nothing, when you love something and you have a passion for it, teaching it becomes,
Well, I tell you something, Mrs. Mason-Francis. You taught me French, actually. You started teaching me French in Form 3 and 3 and 4. And admittedly, I was scared of you. I was so scared of you. And I should let you know that there were other students who expressed the same fear. You were uncompromising. I think you had a lovely heart, but we didn't quite know that. We only experienced that when we got to Form 5, when you taught us French in Form 5, the Kenneth Lawrence, the Dwight Matthias, and those guys. And to us, or to me, I must say, it was rather strange because this lady who I thought was so austere and who was so rough and tough, now we saw a different motherly lady who we just seemed to enjoy. And it seemed to me that you enjoyed teaching boys.
Yeah, I enjoyed my teaching days at GBSS. I mean, I have absolutely no regrets of some of the years spent at the Grenada Boys Secondary School. And sometimes I wonder what has happened over the years that you see the sort of changes. Well, in all the schools now, the changes you see. But in those days, I think, again, discipline was maintained. The children know, the student knew, the parents knew where the authority lay, and everybody did their part and supported.
Okay. Yeah. Now, we're just going to delve a little, we're going to go back a little into sport. And I would like, Mr. De La Motte, you would tell us what back then the cross-country route was. It's changed now, the cross-country route.
Oh, yeah.
What was it in your time? What was the route like?
Oh, it was quite, I don't remember all the detail, but I know it went up as far as Parade on the hill. I don't remember, I think it went up the lane and came back down. But
back in your time?
Go up, I'm not sure. But we had to go up and across across Tempe, across White Gun and Monjalua, that sort of area.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. I mean, in a sense, I like sport, but I'm no athlete. So
Yeah, you didn't
I
run.
never did make it much.
And could you tell us the early days and the early rivalry that existed between PBC and GBSS? There was that rivalry in the very early times. Can you
Well-
tell us a little bit about that? And maybe Mrs. Mason-Francis can
Well,
chime in on it too.
But there, I could stick a pen because actually PBC came into being after we moved in here.
Yeah.
Because in my second form, I was in class with Dr. Bernard Gittins and people like that, you might remember. But then in 1947, the PBC opened, and they went over and started PBC. So some of the boys from GBSS went over, and so that PBC could actually start with a 3-form entry.
Okay.
Yes. So a lot of the Catholic boys went from here. There was Dr. Bernard Gittins, Neville Emmanuel, Macmillan, Spunky Macmillan, and a few other people like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Mrs. Mason-Francis, you'd like to chime in on that GBSS PBC rivalry?
GBSS PBC rivalry.
Well, whether it was athletics or whether it was football, the very early days, I know that there was always
perhaps I could
the
go
clash.
to the athletics part of it.
Yeah, I think by the early 50s, there began to be some rivalry, yeah, in athletics and things like that. Because, of course, the other thing about sport was they used to have inter-island tournaments
Yes.
there between the Windward Islands. So every year, the athletes will go to one island. So from Grenada, we would go to St. Vincent or St. Lucia, and at one time, the others will come here. So we had these inter-island tournaments.
Yes, and the athletes from Grenada was represented mainly by GBSS boys, weren't they?
Yeah. It was GBSS only,
GBSS,
as
that's
far as I
correct.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know that presentation actually it was involved in that. Maybe it was after I left, but it wasn't in my time.
Okay. So
Yes, if I could-
sorry.
No, I was saying if I could say something about these Windward Island games that was mentioned.
Yes.
Between the islands, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Dominica. And that, again, the students coming in from where the hostel was there, and then you had different homes accommodating the students and the teachers from the islands. And this is where, again, I, as a child growing up at home, met quite a number of people from the islands. And some used to stay with us, and you became friends, and this sort of mixture that happened. And it is later on, really, that you had that firm rivalry, when the PBC became the Presentation Brothers College, and GBSS. And that started really around the time when you started with the inter-call games.
Right.
And then it was like, you got to form this now friendship between PBC and GBSS, because then there was town against country. And that sort of thing, combined together. But again, you could look into, well, what happened with the games and so on, later on.
Yeah.
So-
I think when we were in Melville Street, of course, boys were not allowed to fight in the playground. So if a fight started, they were stopped, and they had to go and sign up for gloves.
Yes.
And after school on Friday afternoon, they went into the gym with gloves and
Yes.
fought. And
They fought
people
it out.
gather up to see the fights on Friday afternoon. Yeah.
Yes, I heard about those stories.
But that stopped because when we came over here, we didn't have a gym and we didn't have the equipment. Yeah.
Okay, so we had headmasters like before Rankin, we had GC Grant, we had
You had
Jordan.
Grant before.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had Jordan, we had
Archer,
Rankin. Then we had K.I. Smith, of course,
K.I.
who was
Smith, yes.
Barbadian.
Yes, he was both
And-
Jordan and Smith were Barbadian.
Right. But this was historic, Mrs. Mason-Francis, when for the first time in 1964, we had H.D. Batiste becoming the first Grenadian-born bred headmaster of the school. That must have been a very important and significant time for
But I
everybody.
think the names that impacted in my time, it was R.S. Jordan, K.I. Smith, and then H.D. came in after that
Yes.
as a local
Yeah,
headmaster.
but it must have been significant that this was the first local.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Well, again, I can't say exactly how it came about, but the time had reached when, what you might call, you come into your own.
Mm-hmm.
You had arrived at that situation where you're looking now for your own people, Grenadians, to hold the fort. And Mr. Batiste in those days he had worked with both of them, Jordan and K.I.M. Smith. So when a vacancy arose and they applied, he was the next senior person in charge. And then, again, we were still under were we independent? I can't even remember that. But it was a matter of the government of Grenada appointing and choosing,
Yes.
And then Mr. Batiste got appointed.
What was the style of leadership like? H.E. Batiste.
Firm and strong. But through the years, by the time he reached Anglican High School, he had mellowed, but a force to be reckoned with, Mr. Batiste.
Yeah, but I heard about Mr. Batiste even before I came to GBSS. He was known then as Daddy Bakes. I don't know where the name came about, but that's what we know.
That nickname came about from the senior boys in the school.
How did it?
But then
was there a
again,
story about it?
I don't know the details of that. But again, it was a name, yes, it was a nickname, but not for him to hear or for him to know. Because speaking among themselves, they would refer to him like that, and
Yes.
But I mean, no.
Yeah. There's a funny story about Daddy Bakes that if he wanted to,
I don't know the story.
if he wanted to scratch his left ear, he would use his right hand to do that. I heard that story before coming to GBSS.
I really don't know the story of that.
Well,
All the years I never.
You obviously would know much better than that, but I heard that before I came to GBSS. I heard so many stories about Daddy Bakes, and it's quite unfortunate I didn't get a chance to be on it.
Like, even before I started teaching here, when I was at high school, from convent to high school, and we were doing Form 6, and there were some subjects that were not done in the convent at the time, and that's why I went down to the high school for Form 6. And then there were subjects we had to come over to GBSS to do. And then coming over here, we got to know Mr. Batiste and meet Mr. Batiste. And then he used to have English classes on Saturdays, down by where the old school was in Back Street. And again, many of the fifth formers and the sixth formers used to go to his English classes. So that we got to know him. Even before I came to teach here, I was aware and I knew him. So that respect, and so you never look at a teacher and call him by their nickname or use a nickname in their presence where they could hear.
No?
You will know there was a nickname for you. But I mean, yes, no.
A disciplinarian he was?
Oh, yes. Very, very stern person, disciplinarian, everything. I mean.
Yeah, but
yes.
was there a humorous side of him, or he was just always firm and resolute?
No, he was always a firm, principled person. I mean, carried out his duties, what had to be done, who had to be caned, and this sort of thing. And, no, I wouldn't call somebody a soft person. No.
Okay.
Yeah. After K.I.M. Smith and so on, and Mr. Batiste, and then,
Mr. De Lamont, tell me about the hours, the school hours, when you came across here to GBSS.
Yes, it was 9. We came to school at 9 in the morning, and then we had a lunch at 12 to 1, and then we went back to school till 4 o'clock.
Go that over again?
3:30, 4 o'clock.
Go that over again?
Yeah,
So you came at 9,
yeah,
then there was lunch from 12 to 1.
12 to 1, yeah.
Came back, and then you remained until 4.
Yes, you remained, yeah. You had to go back there. It was in 2 sessions, yes.
Quite a bit.
And of course, in those days too, this sort of racial communities in Grenada were more marked. You know, you had some of the Indian communities were then just coming in from the indentured labor, and you had the remnants of the European communities coming in. And of course, they were not all English people, there were Portuguese and other people coming in here, because I understand that from my heritage, my European ancestors came here after slavery was abolished. Okay. And one of the sons of that family intermarried with a Portuguese family that used to own Balthazar Estate. So they owned the Balthazar Estate at one stage, and that is where my father ended up, where my grandmother was a maid in the house, and my grandfather had an eye for the young ladies. That's the result was my father. Yeah.
How tough was it to get into what was called back then, of course, the grammar school? Was it tough to get in here?
In those, when I went to the grammar school, in those days it was £2, 2 and 6 per term. And mark you, in those days, the laborers worked for I think, 1 shilling and 2 pence a day. So, you know, the average laborer didn't stand a chance of sending his child to GBSS. You know, the salaries were very low. It was £1, 2 and 6 per term, yeah.
So there were a lot of parents who couldn't afford to have their children educated at the boys' secondary school.
There were 6 scholarships offered annually. But again, some of the people who were better off used to hog the scholarships because they were able to give their children a better start. So when they had a test for who will get the scholarship, it was often the people who could already afford whose children got scholarships, you know. So the really poor people very often didn't get scholarships, you know. So you had a lot of that. Of course, by the 1930s, before the war actually started, most of the European estates were sold off, and so a lot of the Europeans went back to England or to Canada or somewhere like that, you know. And so there were only a few of them here. I mean, my grandfather had 9 sisters, and about 3 or 4 of them married and went back to England and Scotland and various places like that. A few of them remained here.
Yeah, but was it a challenging thing to be a student of the GBSS, or the grammar school as it was called back then, because it carried a certain stature about it?
You were expected to behave like a gentleman. Yeah, I mean.
And what would that entail? This gentlemanly behavior.
Behavior, yes. Well, you had to be careful with your yes pleases and thank yous, and that sort of thing. And of course, you didn't interrupt when adults were speaking. You waited your turn and that sort of thing. We were very well
cultured, huh?
Very well brought up in English middle-class manner. That is why we were so shocked to hear the Fusiliers when they came. You know?
Okay.
Because the way we were brought up was to think in terms of British middle-class manner, and you held your teacup properly, and you laid your knife and fork off properly,
right,
and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Let's look at the school song. When was the school song sung in your days?
The school song came in 1946. It was written by 2 doctors, Dr. Morgan and Dr. Comijon. I don't know which one wrote the words and which one wrote the music, but it was Dr. Morgan, who was, in fact, one of the last few. His brother actually was a member of Parliament in England at the time. That Dr. Morgan, that's who was here. Yeah, so we had that. And of course, at the time, the idea of an independent Grenada would have been laughed out, you know. I mean, in fact, the school song reflects that, because the best we could get to think of becoming independent of the British was to have the West Indian Federation. So that's why in our school song you have a truly great West Indies. You don't have a truly great Grenada.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes, I got that.
You know, it was.
And when was it sung?
Sometimes, you know, it was
Weekly?
brought to us, not daily. I don't think it was daily song, no. But it was sung quite often.
Yeah. In your time, Mrs. Mason-Francis, back in the 60s, how often was it sung? Were there special occasions when it was sung?
No, at every assembly you had the school song. Every assembly, whatever the occasion was.
Yeah.
The school song, and then of course special occasions, and when you have like speech night and different things, is a must.
I sung it often enough I could still remember the words.
Yeah, most GBSS boys, I would think.
I used to refer to the GBSS school song as the GBSS anthem. Of all GBSS boys, I mean, wherever you go, and a few of them get together, after a handful, they stand and they sing their school song as proudly as ever.
There's always been a proud
wherever,
moment.
all over the world, wherever. It's something they are proud of, and they, oh yes.
Yeah, I remember the good old days when I was late for school and the song was being sung at the auditorium, and I'm at the top of Lothers Lane, and you would literally hear the song coming out from the auditorium as boys sang and sang lustily too.
Oh, yeah.
I think we all used to sing it on the first assembly of each term. Or was it the last? But certainly we sung it at the end of term, the two ends of term. We had an occasion to sing the school song.
Okay, let's go back a bit, and I would ask both yourself and Mrs. Mason to tell us about speech night. Speech night, way back in the 40s. What was it like?
Oh, it was a big occasion. Yeah.
Who attended?
People, sort of prominent people were invited in to speak. People who had been successful, former pupils who had been successful and had come back, and people who had achieved something in various forms. And there was a report on usually, we used to have prizes, in fact. We used to get book prizes for coming first, second, and third in form. And we also got a maths prize. So I could boast and say I once got the maths prize and I got a book prize for coming third. I got a copy of the Arabian Nights and a copy of John Halifax Gentleman.
Oh, okay.
And a bit of English literature. Yeah.
Heard of the Arabian Nights, of course, never read. Mrs. Mason-Francis, tell us a little bit about speech night back in the 60s, what it was like.
Speech night.
Yes, parents came to, especially if your son was being honored and given a prize and so on, the parents showed up, and people like that, it was a dress occasion.
Yes.
That was one of the greatest things that happened in the island. Speech night, which was in December, at the end of the year. And again, well, people like attending speech night, you will have the governor or whoever, and that top-notch people, and then GBSS, the governing body, and so on, husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs., and whatever initials they had after them, and the parents of the children. And then the HSC and SC, sixth form and fifth form 5, they would get the prizes for the exams, the subjects they passed, they would get their certificates then. And the other school, the other forms, you will have the children like who would have come past first, second, third, or so, they would also get prizes. And mainly books or pen sets and, that sort of thing. Storybooks, all kind of different books. Proper books, of course, no nonsense. And you had to get those prizes and so for them. Took place in the auditorium. In the early days, well, you didn't have this. It was a part of the barracks before, long time.
It was called the Assembly Hall then, Mr. de la Motte. Where was it located? The Assembly Hall.
Well, once we got here, it was located in that big building that was the Army Mess Hall.
The Mess Hall.
It was on the lower side of the circular grass compound, which is roughly where the netball court is now, because this building is on part of what was the circular bit, for the grass that we were supposed to keep out of. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. There was a huge opening ceremony. It was back in 1957 when this auditorium was built and opened. Were you at the opening, grand opening, no? Or could you remember it?
No,
I
I wasn't here.
Yeah, but it was in fact in 57.
I knew when it was built because I had come back from England, but I used to go and come, you know. I didn't remain in Grenada all the time. I went back because and then I went to England and had some medical treatment. And by the time I came back, COVID had started. And so because of that, I think since then I'm out of sight, out of mind to a lot of people. Yeah.
Mrs. Mason-Francis, GBSS established, of course, its own legacy. We had the 1978 dismissal of Ambrose Phillip, and you were part of the teaching staff at that time, and the GBSS population became very agitated by it. And there seemed to be more action on the part of the students than the teachers themselves. Could you just relive that a little bit? Tell us what it was like and how
What?
Ambrose Phillip, the Ambrose Phillip dismissal in 78. How did the students react to that?
1978?
Yes, it was 78.
I think on that occasion I must have been on leave. I was not around on the campus with that.
Okay.
I was on leave. And I was away, I think in Canada.
Yes, it was 78.
Like that.
Yeah. But GBSS has had this history of not allowing itself to be suppressed, of course, and pushed around.
By people. You have always had like I won't say rebellious nature, but they stood their ground and people knew their rights and they stood for their rights. And you would challenge anyone who seemed to, intrude on what you consider to be your rights or ground. And I think, yes, in the 70s, the late 70s, prior to the revolution and things like that, GBSS students took their positions and stood up for what they thought was the proper thing to do.
Yeah, and even the controversial dismissal of Valentine Francis. Boys were very upset about that.
Of who?
Valentine Francis.
Oh.
Yes.
Right, that was during the time we went to transfer.
That's correct.
Yes, when people were transferred. I have to laugh because I remember I was offered a position and my reply to them was no, with my friend Jackie in the thing at the time. And I said to her, we spoke, if you send it to me in writing as an order, in return you will get my letter of resignation. And that is when I was left alone.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, there was upheavals with all that went on. And the secondary schools, I would say, were at the forefront of these things in the days of the demonstrations and so. The students, again, well, because of the teachers who were involved, even this in Whiteman and then down here and different things. You start up at the PBC with the students. They go and they collect the convent girls. They come down, they collect the Anglican high school students, and finally the GBSS. And they will move down then to the carriacou in front of Otway's house, where they and stuff. I remember during that time now, people like me, I didn't like demonstrations and them kind of thing. I would leave home, I would come down, I would meet my friend Jackie, back where she lived on Lucas Street. We come down, when we reach Bain Alley, she goes to Otway House and I take the next direction to GBSS. And then when we came up here now and things were getting hot and so on, with the demonstrations, our instructions, everybody into the auditorium. Those of you who have your parents' permission to go to demonstrate, you may go. Those who do not have their parents' permission, back to your classrooms. We took the registers, and then everybody else came to send them all into the assembly to sit and we had them in here teaching them. And that is how well we, took care of things. But at that time, there was no way any school could have forbidden students from going to demonstrate. Like with that strong, I know nobody leaving the premises. No. They're going. They were going. So we took care of it. We said, who have parents' permission, fine. And those of you without, in here. So we took care of ourselves. Nobody could tell us, well, And this is how it was.
Okay. Could we back up a little bit, Mr. Dolomova? And in your time, there was the prefect system.
Yes, there was a prefect.
What was it like then? Who were prefects? Who were qualified to become prefects?
Well, the prefects were sort of like voluntary police in a sense. Yeah, they were meant to keep the younger ones in order, and a prefect could report you to a teacher for misbehaving in some ways, and that sort of thing. The prefects were supposed to set an example and keep order in the playground and places where the teachers were not present. Yeah?
Who appointed them? Who chose them back then?
I think the teachers appointed the president. I don't know if it's individual teachers or if they did it as a group.
Staff meetings,
Yeah.
teachers would meet and
Yeah.
that is all.
But I can't tell you how the selection took place.
Okay. In your time, Mrs. Mason-Francis, was the teachers, the staff,
Yes,
who
staff
selected them?
chose the prefects.
And who chose the head prefect?
Well, the head prefect would have been, how should I say? Again, it's the staff. Among the set of prefects, one who stood out the most, his whole behavior pattern, his dress, his disciplinary, that sort of thing. They will have somebody standing out, and then you'll have the head and the deputy.
Yeah.
And then the other prefects,
Yes, there were people who were either near top of their class or were prominent in some ways. There was also the cadet corps,
Yeah.
remember, which functioned. So you used to have that. You didn't have a scout troop. You had the cadet corps. And you actually had rifles and so on that you went and got trained at.
We had scouts when I was there. There was scout movement as well.
Yes. Let's look briefly at the house system, which I think came about in the late 1920s. So you had Archer and Maguire. There was schoolhouse earlier on. Then we had Heap, of course, the house that was named after Administrator William Heap, subsequently Batiste. What was the rivalry like during those days at your time? The rivalry between or among the houses?
Oh, it was quite keen. Yeah, I mean, it was quite. There was the rivalry was good. Everybody wanted to catch up. I mean, if your house had a brilliant athlete, you were all right. I think that is how it went. A lot of the rivalry was more in sport than anything else. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in your time, which of those houses dominated, let's say, the athletics championship?
School schoolhouse
Schoolhouse.
and youth house were very prominent when I was in GBSS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mrs. Mason-Francis, you were Hugh's house mistress, if my memory serves me well, back then. What do you thought what do you thought about it? I know it was not just athletics because you had other sporting activities. Tell us a little bit about the competitions and.
The competition was very keen. I mean, but the main thing for the houses was the athletics, the sports meets, the different houses, and then by then the names were changed. You had Batiste was Heap became Batiste. And then school became Maguire. So you had the 4 houses named after past principals and so. Well, Hughes was from way back when, the Hughes. And then Batiste, Maguire, Archer again after Mr. Archer, who was once there. So competition was always very keen. And again, at a certain time, you had the athletics combined with the academic performances. Like the students would have excelled when you had exams at the end of the terms or so. And they were at the top, and I think they got some points, which was added in and all of that. And then when you came now to like well, we'll come to that later on, I suppose. When you come up to intercall games and so on, and what happened then, that is something we will come into. But the main thing in the school at the competition was, well, the houses, athletics, and academics.
Were there house parties in your time after a victorious house? Were there any house parties, celebration?
Not that I remember.
Oh, no?
No, I don't remember there being any celebration. I think there was a cup provided for the winners each year in different areas. But I don't remember there being any special celebration. No.
But during
I could tell you about
there was,
that.
Mrs.
No,
yes, but
house
in your,
fetes.
yeah, what was it like in
Different
your
houses
time?
met in different buildings and so on. And of course, the high school girls had a prominent place with that, because by then we used to come over to do classes, Form 6 classes with the boys over subjects we didn't do at high school. We'd come over and join them. And house fetes, that was a big occasion the night after sports, different buildings. And in those days, the boys didn't come in with no, you want paper cup and them kind of thing. You had the old pan cups.
Hold on,
those
say
were
that
either
again.
locally made or
The
you
boys
had
came
those you bought.
with pan cups?
They brought their wares, yes. They cup and they plate.
But did you say pan cups?
Yes, the pan cup. You remember before you used to have what you sell now in the stores, the aluminum?
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
and before that we used to have cups locally made by people.
That's true.
Where you use tins or so from different things.
Oh, but it's the first time I'm hearing about the pan cups.
You didn't know
No,
about-
I didn't. I gotta be honest with you. I didn't hear about the pan cups.
You
Education.
never heard, even home and so you didn't know about that?
Yes,
Well,
but I
yeah,
didn't
they
know
used to
about the
come
boys
with that.
coming with pan cups at the house party.
Because again, the pan cup holding a lot. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, there are mad people who used to make a living of making pan cups.
Pan cups, yeah.
I mean, education, of course, it was after the war that compulsory education was brought in Grenada.
Right.
So you had a lot of people who couldn't read. And like my wife who comes from Guelph said, that what used to happen then is that the first week or two of term, the classrooms will be filled, but by the fourth week, they'll be down to 10 in the class, you know.
Okay.
A lot of the people who had to walk a long way to get to school, they take their children out to help them in the garden. They didn't send them to school.
Right.
You know, so there are a lot of people who couldn't read, really.
What was the menu like, Mrs. Mason-Francis?
you mean the menu for the house fete?
For the house fete, what was there?
Well, by then the main thing was, well, you do pilau. So one pot.
Mm-hmm.
And then you might have your tomatoes and lettuce, that's it.
Yeah.
Now this fancy salad, so you have it with all cucumber and the nut cucumber, carrots and cabbage and
Okay.
tomato and lettuce or plain tomato if you have your slice of and thing, but if not, the main thing is the pilau.
Right.
chicken and rice.
Interesting. Let's touch a little bit about music. Was there an official GBSS band in your days, Mr. Dolomont?
No, I don't remember there being a band. There were people who did music and formed a little group of their own, but I don't remember there being a school band. No.
But when, for example, the school song was being sung, was it accompanied by a pianist?
It would be one of the pupils who had learned to play the piano. You know, there were families who were into music. You know, good Protein and young Protein. I think he's a professor of music or something. Gary Protein and John Fletcher, who played the organ in all the churches. Really, it was one of the. John was from the Fletcher family, J.W. Fletcher. He was a cousin of J.W. His father was a cousin of the J.W. He had gone to England to study medicine, but he was very much a musician, and from the sound of it, spent a lot of his time in England touring with a jazz band, and ended up marrying a Scottish woman and coming back here. Then he used to work as sanitary inspector here, but anywhere around the country that he was finished working, he'd be holding a jam session in the rum shops, you know. So, but his son inherited the music, but was not so wayward, and really played the organs in all the churches around the place. He was, on the whole, the Fletcher family were into music quite a lot.
Yeah.
J.W.'s daughter Mary was a good musician.
Yeah.
You would probably have known her around. Yeah. Yeah.
But Mrs. Mason-Francis, we had
the
several
chords.
boys thereafter who
Also, the chords were into music a lot.
okay.
One of the chords' uncles was the leader of the police band. So the chords played, all of them were able to play the piano. Yeah. I don't know anybody playing clarinet or that sort of thing. But later on, the Pitts, Cassie Pitt, who wrote, and his younger brother, what was his name, was also playing music. So some of the Pitts played music as well. Yeah.
But we did have official GBSS bands that played in speech nights and other activities over the years.
GBSS had its orchestra. Somebody almost get in touch with this Dunmas Steele, who lives in Mothe. And he will be able to give you all the history of GBSS Steel Band Orchestra. My father almost disowned my brother when he started playing steel band, because in those days, steel band was what they might say, hooligans and so on, playing in steel band, you know. And they started a group of them, little people playing the steel band and so. But then now, of course, Mommy supported them with that. And you had the GBSS steel band, again, my brother was part of that. And they used to play at all these functions of the school. That is when they might say perhaps the steel band movement started becoming decent, in inverted commas, because school children of here, GBSS, they were the first secondary school to start with a school band, a steel band with the school people playing.
And the early steel bands were considered to be a public nuisance. And the police used to raid them. They used to have to have people on the lookout for the police coming to run off with their pans when they were practicing.
Really?
Because people, especially in Belmont across there, there used to be bands in Belmont. So it took a while before it evolved. And another of the musical families were the Emanuels, who lived in Belmont as well. And they were some of the first people to play tunes of well-known songs on pans, you know. and it evolved from there. But first of all, the steel band evolved from tambu bambu and that sort of music. And it was just rhythm and rhyme, you know.
Yeah.
You would make up whatever rhyme you like, but it's the rhythm that counted. Yeah.
The spout was always talked about. When I was a young boy, even before I came to GBSS, heard about spout. And so many of the boys went across there, the spout, to swim, that sort of thing. Was it something that parents were against? A lot of the boys, did they sneak away to go to the spout? That was always something that a lot of GBSS boys look forward to. I don't know what was so special about it.
I think the thing of it is that where it was situated was closer to the area of Belmont and
Yes.
around than Grand Hunts. So within walking distance for a lot of them, you know, you just go down there and you have a bath and this sort of thing. And sometimes they used to run away from home. Parents don't know where they are. This is why parents was against it. And at the time, too, I think it was when it just started dangerous, you had to be careful. So if you were somebody that couldn't really swim and so on, you had no business being there. So this is what used to annoy parents and that sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
But for bringing the steel band into a respectable level, like there was a man called William Julesbury, right, who was, and one of the Marishaw boys, Bert Marishaw?
From Grenville Street.
Bert Marishaw. They promoted a lot of the steel band and developed the steel band in Grenada, yeah.
This is one of the things like when, about a week or so ago, and they were talking about Angel Harps, and they got the impression that the junior band of Angel Harps must have been the first junior band around. But that wasn't so. Because way back when, you had the steel band, as you said, the Bert Marishaw of Grenville Street, and GBSS, boys here. This is why Doc Steele and John Hood. John Hood is somebody you all should interview about the steel band and how the students used to play it and this sort of thing.
Yes,
My brother was involved in that. And
yes,
I know.
I think through Bert Marishaw, you actually, some GBSS boys used to have a band. You know, Dr. Dunbar Steele was in that band, I know.
Orchestra,
my neighbor, Armando Palmer, who was he was a Grenadian father and a Spanish mother, but he lived in Tempe.
Well, I think it'll take us an entire night to really talk about GBSS.
But interview those two people, Doc Steele and John Hood.
Yes, they've got quite a lot to share. But let me ask, please, Mrs. Mason-Francis, and I know that girls have been associated with GBSS from way back then. But officially, the first group of girls coming out from primary school, 1982. Tell us, because you were here at the time, weren't you? Yeah, you were here at the time. What was the feeling like? Did you get the impression that the GBSS fraternity welcomed these girls, or were there a controversial set of girls that came into?
At the time when the girls became a part of...
Yes.
Well, how it happened then, it was not... What happened then is that all the secondary schools that had their sixth form and girls, they put them in one institution, which became TAMCC or what?
No, not the sixth form. I'm not looking at the sixth form, no. I'm looking at the first set of girls that came in 82, the people like the Sherlock Code and the, what's United Whiteman's daughter, Nisona Whiteman, and
but
you had Pauline Greenwich.
Come into the...
Yes, it was mostly the children of the business people and their estate owners and their estate managers who went to school, mostly in those days.
No.
I'm trying to think back. These girls, didn't they come into it was either Form 5 or something, they didn't come in from Form 1?
No, yes, that's right. Remember, with the advent of the revolution, it was during that period,
What period? What
1982.
Yeah.
82?
Yes, 1982, when GBSS got its first set of girls, I think it was 40 of them that were carded to come. I think just a little less than that in the end came. And Mr. Ashby, in fact, was the headmaster at the time.
Okay.
So I wanted to get an idea as to...
I think what was happening at that time, I was away on leave during that period, so that it didn't impact me as, you know, when I came back, well, they were in already or something like that. But that period...
But I know that there were a lot of people who did not like the idea. And
well, again, the history of the GBSS.
Yes.
You wouldn't want girls. I mean, that I know definitely. That was very controversial.
It was.
Because they tried before, and it didn't work. You know, the idea, it was a strong no from the community, everybody around. But then, of course, Revo time and so on, well, you did what you...
Well, gradually they were phased out from the school, much to the delight of a lot of people. And there were other people who felt that GBSS...
Took a backward step.
People felt that the GBSS took a backward step. There were others who felt that this was a fine opportunity for GBSS to become co-educational. But of course, if GBSS had become co-educational, what name would you
Again,
give it?
You had objection from the old boys of GBSS
That's true.
to that move.
That's true.
Their GBSS with girls and...
Yes. But it was a move by the People's Revolution back then. And of course, you know that you couldn't object to it. When the revolution said yay,
Exactly.
everybody had to say yay. And when the revolution said nay, everybody had to say nay. So though the real Puritans, GBSS Puritans, were against the girls coming back in 1982, I don't think anybody dared to really go against what the revolution was saying then. But how did girls, the earlier days when the girls came here to continue their studies, what was it like? And how do you think they meshed and mingled with the boys back then?
I don't think it was a problem. People adjusted and you fit in, Again, well, you had certain rules and regulations, the girls, the boys, and so on. You spoke to them there and sort of thing. And we didn't have problems really. I don't know.
All right. So, just veering away a bit, Mr. Delamont, what was your most, outside of the cane that you got, what was your most memorable moment at GBSS?
Well, in a sense, I was always a creative child. I would make kites and boats and so on. And then we had a teacher from Trinidad called Mr. Remy. Nobody could remember what Remy was. And he was interested in drama. And he had us, all the creative, myself and Dudley Lowe, who was also a creative young man, and we became friends. And we were doing backdrops and scenery for a play that he put on. And because of that, I got involved in sort of creating background sceneries. And by the time I left school, people then the drama group would ask me to create a background for them.
Really?
And I did one or two sort of mural things. And then, on that background, when the movie industry came to make Island in the Sun, and they wanted somebody who could paint some of the stuff that they installed, I was nominated, I was headhunted for that.
You were?
Yeah.
Really?
Yes. And it, so I would say, in a sense, the creative scenery within the school play was something that started me down a very good path. Mm-hmm. In a sense, I began to find my way, to use Mr. Maguire's words. Uh-huh. But even then, of course, there seemed no hope of it. But after I worked with the film crew, I realized I had the skill, but I had no qualification. So on that, I got inspired. By then, of course, I had a family, and then I decided I had to do something because I didn't see a future for me. Mm-hmm. So I took the gamble and went to England, partly to study. So I had to work and study for 9 years before I qualified.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you have to do it all over again, would you come back to GBSS?
Yeah.
You will?
So that's the way it was.
Okay.
And of course, when I came back to Grenada, people, Dr. Pitt, Dr. Devere Pitt was doing stuff at CSC. And he wanted me, and I started the course at TAMCC. And we had an exhibition of a lot of my work that I brought from England. We filled the upper part of the library where the exhibition is now. Mm-hmm. And we invited all the politicians, the schools, and everything. And the only politician that showed up was Sir Danny Williams. Yeah.
Really?
Yep. And in fact, the press didn't come.
Interesting that.
The press didn't cover the exhibition. The television people didn't cover it.
Yeah, what a shame.
They didn't think it was worthwhile.
I guess.
Yeah, but
let me go across to you, Mrs.
now.
Mason-Francis. Tell me, of course, there are many memorable moments. Is there any particular one that stands out in your tenure here at the GBSS as a teacher?
Any particular?
Memorable moment or moments?
Well, we had quite a few of them. But
If you can give us one, we'd love to hear.
boy.
Yeah.
One of the things to go into that now, I'll have to move into the field of athletics, perhaps. GBSS and athletics. And a force to be reckoned with. When we started off with the internal sports, the different houses and things like that, and then when intercall games came in with the secondary schools, and of course it started with the main schools, then was the GBSS, PVC, High School Convent SAS, and that's where the competition was, and it was like a town country.
Mm-hmm.
Thing. And in the early days, you had TIFF competition, convent, high school, convent, high school, convent. Well, the competition between PBC and GBSS was no competition really. GBSS took it all away in the lead for how many years? And then PBC started coming into the zone, and then the other schools from the country, and it still became a tongue country. That is where the tongue country came in. And the GBSS sort of records and different things that you have there, up to now, some of them are unbroken, like past and present day students. And I think GBSS still has the record up to now, the intercall games, and perhaps the most number of winning and so on. And you had now that reached the stage again of a tongue country thing.
Yeah.
Everybody coming down to beat GBSS and high school.
Yeah, I think SAS might be one ahead. I'm not sure.
SAS?
Yes, I think they might be one ahead.
And the SAS started coming up and coming into their own,
Yes.
So
okay, well, we want to, I don't know if a member of the audience may want to just shoot a question or two, which they would think is really pertinent and would need some comment on. So if maybe there is a question that could be shot from the audience, we certainly take that, and we'll try to see how we can wrap up.
Host, my question concerns nickname. mention was the name of Daddy Bakes as his nickname. But every student that went to GBS has had a nickname from its inception. It was like the norm. You never left school without a nickname. And even today, in jest, someone called it by a nickname. For example, my name was Gubby from Dr. Dolittle play, Gub Gub, the pig. So nicknames is fun, it's historical, and I don't know the origin of it, but I could tell you, I would meet a guy, that's a Dr. Matthias. He would call me by my nickname, Carl Antoine by my nickname, Dr. McIntyre, Puggy. And it goes on and on and on. It's part of GBSS. It's integrated to the history of the school. However, I can't speak of the origin.
Did you have a nickname, Mr. De La Motte? Was there a nickname you got at GBSS?
Did I?
A nickname?
Nickname?
Yeah. Were you given a nickname at the school? No, you didn't have a nickname?
No.
No, he didn't have one. And maybe quite fortunately, I didn't have one either. But so many GBSS boys, some of whom, quite frankly, I can't remember the correct official name,
Yes,
but you would remember their nicknames. I wouldn't want to say who they are now, but they're
I didn't have a nickname. A lot of boys, we had nicknames for most people, and in fact, for nearly all the staff as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any other?
That nickname thing was part of the school.
Yes.
And as you said, like now, sometimes the nickname you remember before you remember the proper name of the person.
That's true.
And they refer to one another by their nicknames, and they can't tell you what the real name.
Well, I think we'll get a question shortly, but and I don't think he would mind at all. Our present Minister of Agriculture, who was a former student here, and was a very popular student too. And remember when he was vying for position on the student council, and he told us that his name was Nine Toes, and everybody called him Toes, and he seemed to didn't mind it at all. In fact, when he introduced himself as running for, might have been treasurer or vice president of the student council, he introduced himself as Toes. Interesting. Yeah, we've got a question.
Just wanted to find out what was the variety of food items available in the tuck shop back then.
What did we have in the tuck shop back then? So we'll get it from you first, Mr. De La Motte, and then we'll have from Mrs. Mason-Francis, because you were there before.
Yes, there used to be stuff sold in the tuck shop, sort of sugar cakes and sandwiches and pâtés and things like that.
What about drinks?
Of course, yeah.
What drinks were there?
Orange juice, mostly. And sort of aerated drinks in bottles, yeah. They would have, yeah.
Okay. What did we have in your time, Mrs.
I
Mason-Francis?
think it was mainly the sweet drinks, what we call sweet drinks. The soft drink, the making of juice was not about the bottle drinks. And then, well, again, in those days, you made drinks with lime, lemonade more than anything else. It's only now we're using all different fruits and putting it in the drink. But in the early days, it was mainly citrus, lime drink and so on. And then you had again, well, what you call butterbread and that sort of thing. And your local sugar cake and fudge and that sort of thing.
Okay.
You know?
And we had sellers who would come up here, the Miss Rubies, and they that would come and sell, and the boys would.
Yeah, people used to come with trays.
Yes.
As well, yeah.
Back in your time?
You get sugar cake and various other things on sale.
Okay. Any other questions from the audience?
I think in the olden days, again,
Yeah.
people used to come in and sell before you had a tuck shop on the compound, you know. I don't know if you had a tuck shop, you know, making things in the school and paying people to think that didn't come in.
Well, when I came in, the
Was
tuck shop
there.
was already there.
Yes, the tuck shop, right. But before that, I think people used to come in and sell.
Okay.
And then don't forget Braffett, the shop on the Carriacou. They had a piece of hair. They had a little shop of hair
Okay.
where they used to sell things from the shop on the carriacou.
Okay, interesting that. Any final thoughts you folk would want to leave with us and leave with our listeners out there concerning GBSS? Oh, we do have.
If I may,
Yes, please.
Sorry to come back again, but I want to say GBSS students have a history from being rambunctious and rebellious. It's intrinsic to the students. I remember the nurses' strike. They were the first to be online with the nurses. And believe me, St. George's was a different place. I think the origin of the revolution started at GBSS because you have to coalesce the Black Power movement, which more or less took root at GBSS. It took off from there, it carried over to the revolution, and Grenada history was formed. So you must make mention, you have to make that connection. Black Power movement, nurses, and so up to the 1979 revolution, GBSS students were on the front line. They took no nonsense from government official. They would tell us straight up, man, go jump off Queen's Park Bridge. We don't like what you did for the school. That's the nature of, as I see it while I was here.
Very much. And that's true. Yes.
Well,
Any final
I feel
thoughts?
a little lost because really, I suppose that like many people of my generation, I didn't get in on technology very often. And so it seems to me that I remain sort of technologically illiterate, and so at times I feel a little disorientated. For example, you have this show online, but because there isn't an audience there, I'm not sure how I feel about how I'm talking,
What I can tell you, you've done a fantastic job.
It's like talking to a microphone is one thing, talking to people is something quite different.
Yeah, but trust me, you're reaching thousands of people out there. That's the sort of world we live in now.
Yeah.
Yes. Any final thoughts?
Something we didn't really touch on that I suppose will take another whole session. Like GBSS and the involvement and where we have reached today with the intercollegiate games, intercol and GBSS.
Any final thoughts, Mr. Delamont? Okay.
Then and
Okay.
now.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're really appreciative of both of you coming and, just affording your time to us. And I'm sure that listeners, viewers, wherever they are across the globe, are very pleased and heartened. And quite frankly, it has been a learning experience for me too. I've learned a few things that I did not know. So I really do appreciate that so very much. And I'm sure that the other individuals who did not know some of the things that were declared here this evening would be very happy to hear of these new things. And the great legacy of GBSS, we hope that it can be passed on from generation to generation. And it's one of the reasons, because of my love for the school and for what the GBSS stands for, decided to write about the GBSS. It really was a tough task. And I wish I had somebody like you, for example, Mr. Delamont, who was able to, would have been able to give even greater insights into GBSS's past. But we've all got our roles to play in one area or the other, and I think that both of you played noble roles and contributed immensely to what GBSS is today. And I know in the case of you, Mrs. Mason-Francis, 20 years of service, and you've given even more while you were not officially a teacher at GBSS, but you always seem to be there and ready and willing to support and to say something about this great and noble institution. So thank both of you. We thank you, both of you, for coming, and we really do appreciate that. And our audience, sparse as it may be, we want to thank you so very much. And those of you who are in listening land, thank you so very much for joining us. This is GBSS way back then. Thank you. Okay.